to do that through a ground invasion, okay? So the United States is trying to topple Iran. But then you also have other actors, okay? So Iran. What does Iran want to do? What does Iran want to do? Or basically the Revolutionary Guard Corps. What do they want to do? Should we? They want to kill as many Americans as possible, okay? Do you understand? They want to force an American landing invasion, okay? So Iran wants to force a U.S. invasion, knowing that if the U.S. invades, it has to lose the war, okay? It will lose the war because the Revolutionary Guard can just send suicide bombers against the United States, okay? Now let's look at Israel. Okay? We know that the United States wants to topple Iran. We know that Iran wants to force a U.S. invasion to defeat the Americans, to humiliate the Americans, and exact revenge for what happened in the past, okay? What does Israel want to do? What is Israel's optimal outcome? Do you guys know? If you're Israel, what do you want to happen? Okay, so you want Iran defeated, okay? And then what do you want to happen? You want Iran defeated, you want the proxies defeated, and then what do you want to happen? Do you want the United States to stay in the Middle East? What happens if the United States and Iran both lose the war? I mean, Iran is destroyed as a country, the United States is destroyed as a military presence in the Middle East. What would happen? Israel becomes the top dog in the Middle East. Do you understand? Okay? Israel can now control the entire Middle East. So the optimal outcome for Israel is Iran and the United States are both destroyed. Okay? Do you understand? How about Saudi Arabia? What is their optimal outcome? Exactly the same as Israel. Exactly. Okay? Do you understand? Okay? Which will leave the Middle East to Saudi Arabia and Israel, but Israel is a far superior military than Saudi Arabia. Okay? Remember, it's very easy to blow up Saudi Arabia. They have oil fields. Okay? Not that easy to blow up Israel. So Israel becomes a top dog. Do you understand game theory? In other words, all the major participants want an invasion of Iran. Okay? But they want different outcomes. And Saudi Arabia and Israel most benefit if this situation happens, where you have 100,000 U.S. troops in the country and they can't get out, okay? Because it becomes sunk cost fallacy. The United States can only pour in more soldiers. Okay, does that make sense? All right. So is this clear to you guys? Okay? You can either use historical analysis to get to this outcome, but you can also use game theory to get to this outcome. Any questions so far? Okay, great, okay. So Celine asked the most pivotal question, okay? The United States has nuclear weapons, which is its ultimate trump card, right? So what Trump can say to Tehran is like, I have 100,000 troops in the country. You have to let them go, or I will nuke you, okay? Do you understand? Trump can say that. Listen, I'm Trump. I'm Donald Trump. I need to look strong. I have 100,000 troops in the country. I can't get them out of the country. So he says to Tehran, you either let them go, okay? You either guarantee him safe passage out of the country, or I will nuke you. Right? So that's what will happen. That is what Donald Trump will do. Once the situation arises, the only way for Donald Trump to save face is to threaten Tehran and says, you either let my guys go, or I will nuke the entire country. Right? So, how does Tehran get out of this situation? How do the Iranians protect themselves against this possibility? Because you're absolutely right. This is exactly what will happen if this situation will arise. Trump will respond with nuclear weapons, or the threat of nuclear weapons. So what must the Iranians do to protect themselves against this possibility? Who can help the Iranians now? Russia. Okay, do you understand? So before this war happens, Iran and Russia must come to an agreement where Putin says from the onset, no one is allowed to use nuclear weapons. Okay? If Iran uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke Iran. If the United States uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke the United States. If Israel uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke Israel. Okay? If Putin says that, how will the world react? If Putin says this, you are not allowed to use nuclear weapons, how will the world react? He's a hero, right? He saved humanity. But because he says this, the United States is now trapped. Okay? You understand? And so this becomes a black hole for the United States, where they can only send in more troops. They can't get any troops out. They can only send in more troops. What's the problem with this? What's the problem with sending in more troops? No, there's actually a huge problem with this idea of sending in more troops. What is it? Okay, you can't, no one wants to go fight. You understand? The military cannot recruit soldiers. All right? But even if you did have enough troops, as Jack says, you can't resupply them. Why? Why can't you actually resupply your army? Why not? But there's a bigger problem than the supply lines. What is it? What do you need to create bullets and ammunition? America has no manufacturing capacity because America moved all its manufacturing capacity to China. Okay? Remember this. So for every one ship that America can build, China can build 232 ships. That's what the Pentagon says. Okay, do you understand? So if this war were to happen, there's absolutely no way America can win this war. It's just completely trapped inside Iran. And once it becomes trapped, some cost fallacy comes into play, and America just puts in all its resources into the country, but it's a black hole. Okay? It cannot use nuclear weapons because Putin has said from the onset, you are not allowed to use nuclear weapons. All right? But now the question then is, why would Putin do that, right? Why would Putin involve himself in this war? And that's what we'll discuss next class, all right? How Putin sees this war and how Putin will react in this war. Okay? But before we end, are there any questions about any of this? Does this make sense to you guys? Is this clear? Any questions? Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So the problem with Iraq is that Iraq is an independent country. Do you understand? There are 10,000 American soldiers in Iraq. So you would need their permission. Even if you had their permission, there's a problem here because there are lots of Shia militiamen in Iraq who are loyal to Iran. Okay? And they would see the American invasion force as an opportunity to attack the Americans, okay? Because there's still anger about the Americans for what happened in Iraq. But even if they could have a staging area in Iraq, they still have to deal with mountains, okay? Do you understand? All right? I mean, the problem is you have 100,000 troops in the country. You have to get out of the country, okay? And it's very hard to get them out of the country. If you go for the mountains, you're going to get ambushed in the mountains. If you go for the air, those drones are going to strike you down. That's the issue, okay? All right? Does that make sense? Okay. Any more questions? Okay, great. So on Friday, we'll talk about Putin, okay?